Hi, I'm Billy Beck, Extension Forestry Specialist with Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and welcome back to Season 3 of Crops TV. Timber harvest is a critical tool in woodland stewardship, and it can be used to achieve a range of forest management goals. Today I'm going to give you some tips when selling timber to come out ahead both economically and ecologically. So for starters, forestry has a big impact in Iowa. We sell annually around $40 million of standing timber. This should be way higher, and I'll get into that in a little bit. This supports 17,000 jobs directly, and those jobs indirectly support 35,000 additional positions. $5 billion in total economic impact every year from Iowa's woodlands. And seeing that we have only 3 million acres of woodlands, that comes out to about $1,700 every year pumped into the Iowa economy from our woodlands. So not too bad for only 8% of the land coverage. So the outline for today, I'm going to kind of flip it from the title. I want to go through three big things that kind of trip a lot of folks up when they're selling timber. They need a little bit more clarity on, and those are the roles of the professionals involved, how to value trees, or what's that tree worth, and then the overall process. There's a number of ways to do it, and I'm going to go through some of the more common processes. Then I'm going to give you some tasks that you can do today to ensure you have high quality timber from now on, and all the compound benefits or ecosystem goods and services associated with that. So first thing, this gets a lot of folks kind of confused, or they may need a little bit more clarity on. There's definitely different roles in the timber harvest process. Not one is any more important than the other, but they're very different, and I think they're worth defining here. So obviously, the landowner is number one. Harvest should be done in accordance to your goals and be in your best interest. The two in red here are often confused by landowners, and I want to kind of define them quickly here. So we have foresters and loggers. And I usually quiz people on this, what the difference is, but I'll go through these. Foresters manage your woodlands to meet your management objectives. They're kind of like a financial advisor or a realtor. They guide you through a complex process using science-based information and ecological principles, and they get you from where you are now to where you want to be in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Loggers safely fell and remove standing timber from woodlands without doing excessive damage to residual trees or the ground, the roads, the streams, the hill slopes, things like that. Foresters, there's generally two types in the state of Iowa. There's public foresters like district foresters with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, foresters with the National Wild Turkey Federation, and other entities around the state. There's also private consulting foresters. Often, public foresters will only mark timber sales if they're associated with a forest stewardship plan. Private consultants, on the other hand, will mark timber sales that aren't associated with a forest stewardship plan. So very, very similar, but they do a little bit different methods of operation. Lastly are the timber buyers. So these are the folks that actually purchase the standing timber from you. Now these can be mills that contract with loggers. They can be the loggers themselves, or they can be other professionals that have loggers on staff and have logging crews. The one thing to remember here is you have to be bonded by the state of Iowa to purchase standing timber. So if someone approaches you and offers to purchase your standing timber, check them out at the link below at the Iowa Bonded Timber Buyers list to see if they're bonded. If they're not, that should be a big flag, and you should pump the brakes on doing that sale. All right, this is often confusing, and the answer I give folks often frustrates landowners. It's often we're going through the woods and they're asking, what is that tree worth? What is that tree worth? Well, there's a lot that goes into it, and I kind of wanted to start off real quick with a quiz. Do y'all know the unit of volume that hardwood timber is sold in the Midwest? The answer is the board foot, or often thousand board foot, or MBF. But it's a unit of wood, if you can visualize it in your head, that's 12 by 12 by 1 inch, or 144 cubic inches. Now we have a range of species in Iowa, and each of those species we've got kind of a hierarchy on their general value. Obviously black walnut, white oak. We grow some of the finest black walnut and white oak on planet Earth. Those are the, quote, most economically valuable species in Iowa. However, all species have potential to be economically viable. You can kind of see the hierarchy and the rankings here. It's really tough. You can't really call the co-op or look up online where to get these fair market values. You kind of have to talk to consulting foresters around the state that are actively doing timber sales, and they give you a general estimate of what they're seeing in the sales in their regions. Fortunately, the quarterly publication Timber Talk from the Iowa Woodland Owners Association, Gretchen Klein, who's a consulting forester, contributes to that every quarter, and she puts out what she's seeing in southeast Iowa. So it's going to be different around the state, but this gives you a general kind of idea of what the species values are out there across the state. And honestly, right now, a lot of our species are very, very strong in market. But a lot of factors go into what that tree is worth once it's out of the woods. So if you ever look at timber sales that have multiple bids on them, the bids vary greatly. And it's not just because somebody's trying to cheat you and somebody's feeling very generous that day. There's a lot of factors that go into that to determine what is that tree actually worth. So one of them is overhead. So every outfit's got different equipment, different mobilization costs, different costs of just operating in general. So a lot goes into that. Site is huge. As we move further east from the Mississippi River, we get further away from the main mills. You're probably going to receive a less amount of bids and a lower cost for your timber. Also, how easy is the site to access? Does it have a lot of topography? Are there actually sites in the agricultural landscape where you can stage those logs to pull them out? They call it log landing there. So is the site difficult to log and harvest in? Grade is huge. So grade is the quality of the timber. Every mill is looking for something specific. So if it matches that and it's exactly what they want, you're going to see a higher price for that wood than if it's kind of damaged by insect and disease, storm damage, or it just doesn't have the quality that they're looking for. And of course, size. So bigger logs obviously draw bigger dollars. So the answer to that question is that tree is worth what someone is willing to pay you, and we'll get into this in a second. That's the beauty of soliciting multiple bids for your timber harvest. If you're just working with one person and you haven't worked with them before and there's not really that trust established yet, you really don't know if you're getting the true market value or the maximum value for your timber harvest. So just a little bit on grade. This is a really big driver on what you're going to receive for your timber harvest. So an oak is not an oak is not an oak. A walnut is not a walnut is not a walnut. There's a lot that goes into grade and quality. And it's heavily influenced by how we manage our forests. That's kind of a topic for another day. But just some things right here that could devalue logs, even though they're large trees. So we have epicormic shoots or sprouts that are coming out of the main trunk. Those are going to devalue the log there, and they're going to reduce the volume that the person will bid on. Is the log straight? Is it straight or crooked? We call it crook or sweep. We want at least a 16-foot log for saw logs a lot of times, and then higher quality products such as veneer, which is very thinly sliced wood that is overlaying over lower quality wood. We want actually 10 to 12-foot logs in that case. Finally, there's a lot of defects out there that can impact saw log quality, but especially veneer quality. We want very uniform grain patterns in veneer. So on this screen here, the red circle is called a cat face. So at first glance, it looks like nothing much is going on there. It looks like regular old bark, but if you look closely, there's a kind of gnarled appearance to it. That's an old limb that is sealed over, and they will deduct that volume from the overall volume of that log, thus decreasing the price. Timber buyers are incredibly skilled, and they have almost x-ray vision. They go through intensive, almost year-long training just to get up to speed, and they can see all kinds of defects in that wood just by looking at the bark. So pretty impressive profession there. So the first process I want to go through in selling timber is what I feel is most relevant to the majority of landowners across the state. It's called the lump sum sealed bid process. So the first step in this is obviously the landowner sets their goals, right? It can be obviously timber revenue. It can be wildlife habitat. It can be recreation. It can be hunting. It can be aesthetics. It can just be a nice place to hang out with your family. It can be, I want to increase forest diversity. So a lot of things can be accomplished through timber harvest, not just dollars. But the harvest has to match your goals. And that's the beauty of working with a professional forester. They're going to look out for your goals, not just the economics of the harvest. Secondly, the forester is going to take those goals into consideration and create a stewardship plan, ideally, for your property. And if that plan includes a harvest and we agree to go ahead, they're gonna mark the timber to remove that's going to match those your management goals. And oftentimes they don't mark to remove all of the economically valuable trees on the property. If they did, that would be called a high grade, removing all the best at once. Then you remove all of your best genetics, and you're kind of left with a low quality timberland in the future. Once they get done marking those trees, they're going to give you a really detailed inventory telling you how many trees were marked, what species they were, what their grade was, an estimate, and they're going to give you a dollar range that they expect to get from the highest bid once they solicit those sales to buyers. Now, are they always right on the money? No, but they do a really good job of getting pretty darn close. So when the time comes, you'll sit down with the forester, you'll open up the bids, and then you will then select the top dollar bid. And as you've ever seen a timber sale go down, those bids vary greatly. So that's the beauty of not just working with one person that knocks on your door, but getting a range of bids. Again, it's what they were willing to pay you to get that maximum return from your timber sale. Another critical piece to think about is having a contract set up. In that contract, it should state, and we'll get into this in a second here, that landowners should be paid in full before the chainsaws even start. So you're paid before the trees start coming out of the woods. It's very, very important. This is just a general template. We've got a general template that I'm updating now for timber sales. A lot of consulting foresters, a lot of public foresters will have their own kind of template, but these are some critical things to think about when you're assembling this contract. You want to include the dates and the deadlines of both payment and harvest. You want to include the specific trees to harvest. Usually these are painted by the forester to make sure that the cutters know exactly what to take. You want to state that the trees shall remain in the seller's property, shall remain the seller's until they're paid in full. And then kind of discuss what to do if there's damage to residual trees and damage to the property. This doesn't always come up. Loggers are very professional. They almost have surgeon-like precision when they're felling and removing these trees, but always be sure to kind of state that clearly. What do we do if residual trees are damaged? And then you can add special provisions to the contract, like, I don't want you out there during my muzzleloader hunting season. I don't want you out there when the soils are saturated and we can see soil compaction and erosion. What do we do with the tops? There's a lot of tops hanging around after the harvest is done, so what should we do with those? And then any kind of condition of the roads, trails, and streams that you think is important to include, and make sure that's undertaken during the harvest. So it's beneficial to everybody to get things laid out clear in writing before the saws even start. So a lot of people don't know what to do during, and they don't know what to expect after the harvest. There's a lot of different harvest methods that range from clear cutting, which the entire canopy is removed, down to selective harvesting, where select trees are removed. But in general, it's always great to welcome the loggers to your place. That shows that you care. It shows that you're invested in the overall process. Give them some food. If it's cold out, give them some coffee. Check in with them once in a while at lunch. Don't look over their shoulders. They're professionals. They do this every day. But welcome them. Show them that you're invested in the process. Expect some damage to residuals. Now, the forester's responsibility is to mark trees to be cut so that there's not a lot of damage to residuals, and obviously it's the logger's responsibility to minimize damage to residuals, but just expect some. It's not gonna be a perfect operation out there all the time. Afterwards, expect a temporary messy look, especially tops and stumps. A lot of folks think that when the harvest crew is out, it's gonna look like a park and everything will be raked up and nice and there will be no debris left. But expect a messy look. That messy look is going to go away in a few years. And that downed wood has incredible potential. For example, it's going to be eventually soil organic matter. It's got wildlife benefits. It can protect young seedlings or regeneration from deer browse. So there's a lot of good value in that downed dead wood. And then be ready for any follow-up activities. And again, this is the beauty of having a plan and working with a professional forester. You know exactly what to do and when to do it following these harvests by reverting and reading your plan. A second process that is out there, it's fairly common, but it's only really relevant if you have kind of a special situation that's going on. So a lot of times, grade and yield is done when it's tough to attract competitive bids. So this might be a smaller harvest. It might be storm damage. It's essentially where you want to get management done and revenue is not really a big concern of yours. And you're afraid that you might not get you might not attract a lot of bids for the project. So what would happen in this case is your forester would reach out to maybe one or two buyers and say, hey, this is the project we have in mind. Come take a look. The buyer would then look around and say, okay, I'll give you a guaranteed base rate price. Then what happens is they go in there and cut. They remove the logs from the woodland. Then they scale and grade. So they estimate the volume and the grade of that. Once they're out of the woods, you're guaranteed to get the base payment. But if there's a bonus, if there's more value than what they expected, you'll get that added value as well. So again, this is kind of a special situation. One maybe drawback or compared to the lump sum sealed bid is you're not getting that range of bids, but you're getting that management objective forwarded. All right. So, some things you can do today to ensure quality timber and resilience, and again, all the great ecosystem goods and services that go along with a healthy, vigorous forest. Some things you can do today to help ensure this. We always say healthy forests are no accident. If you take a hands-off approach, that's okay, but you're really not going to maximize the overall value economically and ecologically of your woodlands. Number one, walk your woods with a professional forester and ideally develop a forest stewardship plan. This can take many forms, but some of the big components of these plans are a detailed inventory. What do you have right now and what's the condition? Taking into account your goals, and then the forester is going to prescribe activities, management activities, timber harvest may be one of them, to meet those goals, and they're going to tell you when to do it to meet those goals too. So this is like what you can fall back on in times of like a derecho or emerald ash borer. It's always great to have that plan. And that plan will let you know exactly when harvest should occur to meet your goals. If someone approaches you and says, hey, I'd like to buy your timber, can I take a look back there? How do you know if it's ready to sell? How do you know at that point, if the sale goes on today, if that's going to meet your management objectives from now on? So again, the beauty of working with a professional forester. One cool thing they're going to do is they're going to break up your woodlands into what's called a stand. So a stand is an area of woodland that's got similar species compositions, similar size, similar age classes, similar soils, similar slopes, similar management history. So it can be treated as an individual management unit. And often harvests go down at the stand scale. Educate yourself. A lot of folks really aren't aware of what the heck they've even got in their woodlands at all. And all species have value, but some of the top species, both economically and ecologically out in the woodlands, are really good to know if you've got or not. So the first one is oak. Oak's the backbone of our forest products industry, an incredible, valuable tree ecologically. But oaks have a clustered terminal bud, so almost like a fist at the end of their twigs. They've got leaves that have lobes, or like your fingertips, and sinuses, like the space between your fingers. And we've got native oaks in the white oak group, like bur oak, chinkapin oak. We've got native oaks in the red oak group, like red oak, pin oak. If you look closely, red oaks, the red oak group, have these bristle tips at the ends of their lobes. So that's a really good way to tell in the growing season, is this a red oak group or a white oak group? Do I have black walnut? One of the great things about black walnut is the leaf scar, where the leaf petiole or base pops off every fall when leaves senesce and abscise or drop. And black walnut's leaf scar looks like a monkey face, to me. Anyway, you can use your imagination as you would, but to me they look like a monkey face. Very, very distinct leaf scar on black walnut. They have a compound leaf as opposed to oak, which means they have a single midrib with a number of leaflets coming off of that midrib, and that whole thing is the leaf. So that whole thing falls off in the fall. And they've got a beautiful kind of almost chocolatey furrow and ridge pattern bark on them. So do you have oak and do you have black walnut? Often I tell folks, if you do anything in your woodlands, identify and attempt to control invasive species. So a great time to do this is early in the spring and late in the fall. This was out in December in Story County, central Iowa here. If you see a carpet of green when everything else, trees, shrubs that are native, are leafless, that's a really good indicator that you've got an invasive species issue. These are non-native species often that are aggressive and great invaders. They can take over. They can do a lot of harm, including suppressing regeneration of desirable timber species. So look at the carpet there. You can imagine all the sunlight that they block and take up, preventing young oaks and young walnuts from getting that sunlight. So this is one of the most critical things I can say. Get out in spring and get out in fall and see, do I have invasive species present out in my woodlands? Another thing is, a lot of folks only look up. I really encourage you to start looking down because forests change. They are not static. They are not these grand park-like settings forever. You need to start looking down and saying, what is my future forest? Is it what I want or is it what I don't want? So the photo of me here is, the background is invasive species. So if we had a derecho or an outbreak of some pest and pathogen and the canopy opens up, what's going to be waiting to take full advantage of that new sunlight? Is it an oak seedling or is it an invasive species? So start looking down. So most importantly, we know this from surveys and just speaking with folks across the state, folks are not really aware of all the resources that are available for them for forest stewardship. You don't have to go it alone. So number one, we've got our professional forester contacts page on our website. We've got a clickable county map. You click on your county, you know you can find out the professional, both public and private foresters that serve your county. The Iowa Bonded Timber Buyer List. Again, if someone approaches you to buy timber, look them up first. If they're not bonded, that should be a big red flag. The Iowa DNR curates this list every year. Our Extension Forestry website, anything and everything with forestry in Iowa. Finally, we've got the Master Woodland Steward Program. This is going to be in Lee County and north central Iowa in the spring of 2023. This information on that can be found on our website. And then one final thing I'd like you to consider is the Forest Reserve Program. If you meet some basic stipulations, you don't pay property taxes on your woodlands if you are enrolled in this Forest Reserve Program. So again, I'm Billy Beck. Timber harvest is a critical tool in woodland stewardship. And usually when folks manage for other objectives besides timber income, they often do a harvest at some point in their lives. So it's really critical to know how to do it right and be aware of how not to do it right. So if you have any questions at all, here's my contact information. And I really appreciate your time today. Thanks.